If I told you that money printing was never designed to save economies, you might think that sounds dramatic. After all, governments use comforting language, stimulus, liquidity support, quantitative easing. But history tells a different story, one far older, far darker, and far more consistent than policymakers ever admit. Because every time societies gained the power to expand their money supply at will, they didn't use it to strengthen their economies. They used it to survive their own crises, and eventually those same crises came back even bigger. Welcome back to Historic Finance Lab, where we uncover the hidden forces shaping your money, your future, and the world you live in. Today, we're going deeper than headlines, deeper than central bank jargon, and deeper than the tidy explanations governments prefer. We're following a pattern that stretches across civilizations, from ancient Rome to imperial China to Weimar Germany to the modern digital age. Because once you understand the real purpose of money printing, you'll understand why no country has ever escaped its consequences. Before printing presses even existed, governments still found ways to expand their money supply. In the ancient world, coins made of gold and silver were real, tangible value. But rulers soon realized something. If you can't create more wealth, you can still pretend your coins contain it. This began a process known as debasement, quietly mixing precious metals with cheaper base metals while keeping the face value the same. The Roman Empire perfected this. The silver denarius, once about 95% pure silver, was gradually diluted over centuries. By the empire's later years, the silver content fell below 1%. Soldiers demanded higher pay, prices skyrocketed, and public confidence collapsed. But emperors kept debasing because admitting the truth that the state was broke was politically impossible. The world's first major inflationary collapse didn't require a printing press, it just required human nature. And in that moment, governments discovered a temptation that never left them. Fast forward to 11th century China during the Song dynasty, the birthplace of the world's first paper currency. At first, it was a great solution to a real problem: metal shortages. But paper was just so much easier to produce than metal. And like every government before and after, China eventually issued more notes than its economy could support. The worst overprinting came under the Yuan dynasty, where massive issuance fueled inflation so severe that the currency eventually collapsed entirely. By the time the Ming dynasty took power, they were so traumatized that they banned paper money for centuries. The technology changed. The pattern did not. Europe also discovered this power, especially during wartime. Kings clipped coins, melted old currency, and repeatedly promised the public these measures were temporary. They rarely were. Wartime spending always exceeded tax revenue, and debasement became the hidden tax no monarch had to ask permission for. Every European power used it. Not because it helped citizens, but because it kept governments afloat. By the late Middle Ages, debasement wasn't an accident, it was policy. The 1600s introduced a turning point: the creation of central banks. starting with Sweden's Riksbank and the Bank of England. These institutions weren't designed to stabilize economies. They were designed to finance governments, especially during war. By issuing notes backed by government debt, central banks allowed states to borrow more, fight longer, and spend far beyond their tax base. The public gained access to credit, trade expanded, and economies prospered. But the underlying incentive remained unchanged. Once governments gain the ability to create money, they will always use it. Not because it's wise, but because the alternative, raising taxes or cutting spending's politically dangerous. No figure demonstrates this better than John Law, the brilliant but flawed architect of France's monetary experiment in the early 1700s. After convincing the government that paper money backed by shares in the Mississippi Company could unlock unlimited prosperity, Law created a financial boom unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Credit surged, speculation soared, and fortunes multiplied overnight. Paris felt like the center of a new economic universe. But speculation is not wealth, and paper promises can't outgrow reality forever. When confidence cracked, the bubble collapsed into chaos. The currency crashed, savings evaporated, and riots erupted. John Law fled the country in disguise, but governments didn't learn caution from his failure. They learned possibility. For a brief moment, printing money created the illusion of endless prosperity, and that illusion was too powerful to forget. Moving into the 20th century, the world faced a new scale of crisis. World War I drained national budgets across Europe. With tax revenues insufficient, governments turned again to the tool history had handed them. Germany pushed this to extremes. By late 1923, prices were doubling in days. Workers were paid twice a day, so they could spend their wages before they lost all value. People used banknotes as wallpaper, fuel, even toys for their children. But Weimar Germany was not unique. Austria, Hungary, Russia, and many others followed similar paths. Once a government depends on money printing, reversing course becomes almost impossible till the currency breaks entirely. After World War II, the global financial system attempted to impose discipline through the Bretton Woods Agreement, which tied currencies to the US dollar and tied the dollar to gold. But the system had a fatal flaw. Governments wanted flexibility without responsibility. The US issued more dollars abroad than its gold reserves could support. Other nations noticed, and in 1971, President Nixon ended convertibility altogether, severing the last major link between global currencies and physical limits. This wasn't just a policy decision. It was the beginning of the world's first fully fiat global system, an experiment with no historical precedent. Money now had no anchor, no boundary, no restraint beyond political will. In the decades that followed, central banks learned how to print money without printing anything at all. Through quantitative easing, balance sheet expansion, and digital liquidity injections, they created trillions of dollars with just keystrokes. Between 2008 and 2020 alone, The world's major central banks expanded their balance sheets by over $25 trillion. This new form of printing was invisible, silent, and politically convenient. No wheelbarrows, no physical notes, no dramatic headlines, but the effects remained familiar. Asset prices surged, wealth concentrated at the top, wages lagged, and savings lost purchasing power while debt loads exploded. Governments framed it as a rescue. But the deeper truth is simpler. Printing money became the only tool powerful enough to paper over decades of financial imbalances. Money printing does not create wealth, it redirects it. It shifts value from savers to borrowers, from workers to asset owners, from the present to the future, from the public to the state. Inflation isn't an accident. It is a deliberate policy, a slow method of reducing the real value of government debt, while transferring the cost to ordinary citizens. And throughout history, the side effect has always been the same. The further money printing goes, the more fragile the currency becomes.